Once again, Gareth Southgate is giving youth a chance as the Nations League hits the calendar, and we'll also be seeing some international football once again. He's called up a number of uncapped players, particularly young ones, Mark Ogden, the likes of Phil Foden, Mason Greenwood, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, to name but a few. But of those players that I've just mentioned, who do you think's got a long-lasting career with the national side?
Well, I think the two that stand out for me are Phil Foden and Mason Greenwood. And, you know, Foden has been knocking on the door now for 2 or 3 years at Man City. He's been groomed for stardom, and he's been held back a little bit by Pep Guardiola. I think David Silva was in his way, but towards the end of last season, certainly after the restart, he played a lot and he made a big contribution. And now he's 20, so he's at the age where he should be playing regularly for Man City and then developing to become an England player. Because by the time the Euros come around next summer, he'll be 21, and that isn't young anymore for a top player. That's the sort of time he should be, you know, developing into an international star. So for me, Foden he's got the world at his feet. I think he can be an absolute superstar for club and country. So Foden's a definite for me. And Mason Greenwood at, 18, he's had a great first season at Man United. I do think that we have to expect a bit of a dip in his second year because he's so young and people will be more aware of him. And, it's never easy the second time around. But, Mason Greenwood has got everyone excited at Man United. And I think if you score so many goals in your first season and you get elevated to the England squad at 18, you start getting compared to people like Wayne Rooney, Michael Owen, even Marcus Rashford, who had a similar call-up. So they've all had decent international careers since. Some have had spectacular international careers like Rooney. So I think Greenwood and Foden for me are the two to keep an eye on.
What have you made of Calvin Phillips being called up when it's obviously being judged on a championship season for him? Yes, he's a Premier League player now. And then someone initially like Jack Grealish being overlooked, who's only now got his place in the squad because of Harry Winks and Marcus Rashford pulling out.
Yeah, I think they're probably two separate cases because Grealish is more of an attacking player than Phillips. Phillips, for me, is a guy that can play at the back, centre-half, or he can play defensive midfield. And a lot of fans will be unaware of Calvin Phillips because the focus now is so much on the Premier League. But he had a fantastic season at Leeds last year, big part in their promotion to the Premier League. And I think Southgate's made a point as well that he's had some great coaching under Marcelo Bielsa at Ellen Road. So, it is a big gamble because at his age, I think he's 24 now, he's not played in the Premier League before. He could be a guy that look at in training and find that he's not quite ready yet. But the fact they're looking at him also tells you that England have got a bit of an issue in midfield. They haven't got any players you can say, yeah, they're nailed on, starters. I think Eric Dyer's now been moved back to centre-half. Declan Rice, the jury's still out on Declan Rice. So, Calvin Phillips, I suppose he's one of the best options around there, even though he's not played in the Premier League.
There's a list of under-23 players. It's actually endless. Obviously, Marcus Rashford's now pulled out at the moment, but we know, and we've already seen him involved at the highest level with England. You've got the likes of Mason Mount in there, Jadon Sancho, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Dare I ask if this is the golden generation of England players, Mark?
Yeah, I think the golden generation seems to be a label that gets stuck in every generation of England players. It turns out to be the bronze generation, doesn't it? If not even worse. I think, these are good players, and the one thing that they do lack at the minute is kind of nailed on players in the late 20s that you could think that have actually been there and done it. They got to the World Cup semi-finals in Russia 2 years ago, and I do think that they probably overperformed. They look at the run to the semis, and I think that kind of gave people a bit of a false impression of how strong England were. Whenever they play against a good team, they can't keep the ball. So they're not quite as bad as they were in the Euros when they were, embarrassed by this weekend's opponents, Iceland. But ultimately, England always fall down because they can't keep the ball against the best teams. People like Foden and Mason Mount, and maybe even Calvin Phillips, know how to keep the ball. They are more technically gifted than players of previous generations, but I don't think they're at the level yet of the so-called golden generation, which ultimately won nothing. The Lampard, Terry, Ferdinand, Michael Owen, Wayne Rooney, all these great players that never delivered. So, time will tell. It depends on the look of the draw, things like that, people getting injured. But I do think that England have got a chance of, certainly getting to the latter stages of competitions, but maybe it's because I'm English, I'm pessimistic. I don't see England winning any major tournaments anytime soon.
It's definitely serious for Gareth Southgate in the fact that he's called these youngsters up because he's actually gone on the record to say he's taking a look at them to see if they're going to be good enough for next summer. On the flip side of that, do you think they could be pushing some of the names that we're used to seeing in the England squad out, some of those older players?
Well, that's the chance that they have, isn't it? And I think Southgate's very smart as well. When you give younger players a chance, if they don't perform, you've always got the excuse to say, look, the young players, they've got inexperience, that they're not quite ready yet. And when you've got a team of players in the mid-20s, the late 20s, there are no excuses anymore. You can't point to inexperience. So Southgate, in a way, is giving himself a bit of cover by giving the youngsters a chance. But, people like Kyle Walker are still around, and he had a difficult season at City last year. He hasn't been replaced yet. They're still struggling for a left back. Danny Rose was mentioned for this squad, and he hasn't had the greatest season. So, some of the so-called old guard are still there. I think the one player, strangely, that could be under threat most is Harry Kane, because I know he scores goals and he's had a great couple of years for England. But look at the players up front: Marcus Rashford, Mason Greenwood, Raheem Sterling, Jadon Sancho. There's a lot to fit in there, and if Harry Kane doesn't keep on scoring goals, he doesn't offer much else. When he's not scoring, he doesn't actually offer much else, Harry Kane. So, last World Cup's Golden Boot winner could be the guy that is the biggest name to fall here. I don't think he will just yet, but, the young players are certainly exciting up front. The Southgate might decide to go another way, and if that's the case, Harry Kane is vulnerable.
That's interesting. So let's just go on that point. With Harry Kane was obviously a big feature, as you said, in the World Cup. England made it to the semi-finals in 2018. Is this crop of players that Gareth Southgate's got available to him right now actually better than that 2018 squad?
I suppose the potential is there to be better. Certainly in attacking positions, I think they've got a great array of talent. But it all goes back to midfield for me, and I think England still don't have anyone in midfield that you'd think, yeah, he's the guy that can make a difference. Not probably, Paul Gascoigne, Paul Scholes are the other player that can create, and that guy could be Phil Foden if he develops as people expect at Man City. That could be him, but he plays a bit further forward than those guys, and I think, time will tell. I think next summer might be a bit too soon. France will be strong, Germany will be strong. The World Cup in 2022, who knows? That could be anyone's guess, considering it's played in mid-November, December. So maybe 2022 is the best hope for England to succeed, but it'll be a competitive World Cup. So I think it might be disappointment again.
Well, we're used to that. The future is looking bright for England, but maybe there's still a little way to go yet.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.